We're going to be filling in some bare patches today, so I'm going to talk to you guys about a couple of different ways you can do it, how it works with different grass types, and really just get stuck into helping you guys repair your lawns as well. So let's rip straight into it. Yo mate, what up? Welcome to another lawn tip vid. So we had a few problem areas when we sowed the green, and the spot like this, for example, just kept getting washed out when we kept getting heavy storms. Now this is something you find will happen when you seed a lawn, especially when you seed a lawn. It's very hard to stop erosion and stop things washing out. There's also another spot just here. You can see it just hasn't completely taken with grass. I put seed there, but it washed out. So there's a couple of ways you can look at repairing spots like this, and today I'm going to show you those couple of different ways. So a couple of weeks ago, we removed some lawn plugs from a really good part of the green up the back there, and we moved them into this spot just here. So we are starting to get a little bit of sideways growth. So the idea behind using plugs is you're taking a good patch of grass, putting it in a bare area, and since you've taken out at least 100 mil of a plug with some roots in it, it's not going to be stressed when you put it in this new area, and it will start growing sideways pretty quickly. Now it's been nearly 2 weeks since we put these in, and they've started to push sideways a bit. They're quite thick. This area looks so much better than it did before, but you need to make sure you're doing this at a time that the lawn is actively growing. So you can do this with couch grass, which if you're in the States is the same as Bermuda. Zoysia grass you can do it with. Buffalo grass can even do it with, which you guys have St. Augustine over in the States, you call it. Any grass type that's going to creep sideways, even Kikuyu, you can do this. And plugging would be my way to go, honestly, instead of using seed, because you're going to be using the same grass type you've got in your area already and put it in a bare spot. And it's free as well, very cost effective if you've got a plugger. If you don't have a plugger, you can cut out a square with a shovel. It's going to do the same thing. Now those grass types that I listed off just before are all creeping grass types, so they are all going to spread sideways and move into bare areas by themselves. Now if you're looking at something like some ryegrass, this is a little ryegrass plant just here, that plant's been sitting there for a couple of weeks and it has not moved sideways at all, because ryegrass is a bunch type grass. So it's also the same with fescue. So they're your most common lawn types. They're going to be bunch type grasses there. Most other grass types, even your Queensland blue couch, centipede grass, everything, they still creep. And even Kentucky bluegrass as well. Whereas your ryegrass and your fescue, you tend to need to put more seed down if you've got some bare spots. Plugging isn't really going to do the job for you. Now personally, I would prefer a grass type that creeps, because you don't need to put as much water on the plugs that you're replacing in that area, or when it's creeping sideways, you don't really need to push a ton of water to make it creep sideways. Whereas when you've got seed, you need to keep the water up to it very regularly to help that seed germinate properly. Otherwise, you're going to have problems with areas not germinating properly and having bare spots and wasting money on seed that didn't work because you did not get enough water out. So the idea behind seeding is you put your seed down, cover it with some topsoil, or you rake it into some soil, whatever you're doing, and then you need to keep a regular watering schedule up 3 to 4 times a day, basically not letting it dry out, but not letting it flood either. So it is a little bit of a finicky process. If you've done it before, it is enjoyable, but it is finicky. Now that's cooling off a bit, the moisture's staying in the ground a lot here in Australia, especially here in Orange. So putting seed out and covering it with some sand or some topsoil, it's going to stay moist the whole time, and we're not going to have problems with it drying out. So that's why I'm deciding to seed now instead of seeding like a month or 2 ago, because I didn't want to keep hand watering down here 3 to 4 times a day. I didn't want to keep turning the green on, the whole green on 3 to 4 times a day, because you start pushing issues with disease problems and a lot of other problems as well, because I'm pushing a lot of fertilizer at the moment and nitrogen to help the plugs fill in. So I'm trying to do 2 things at once: get seeded areas to fill in and also get the bent grass to creep sideways. So yeah, all you have to do is put your seed out and then cover it with some soil. I'm even going to put some on top as well, just a light little bit. We don't want to go too crazy because we don't also cause problems with too much seed there, which then can cause problems on top of that. But then we'll mix it in, and I'm not going to do anything with this time of year. That's why late autumn seeding is sometimes the way to go, because you don't have to put as much water out. And we tend to get a little bit less rain this time of year as well, so as in we're not going to get as much washout but the moisture stays in the ground because our temps are down below 15 degrees and below. Now, could you just chuck seed on top of the soil and hope that it's going to grow? You can, and it probably would if it's going to be touching the soil, but it's going to dry out a lot quicker. So that's the main reason we put some soil or some sand over top, is just to retain that moisture in there. Just a little bit easier. Even if it's like cold and you're getting windy days, moisture is going to be sucked out of the ground a little bit easier. Another tip is you can grab your seed, chuck it in your bucket with your sand, and just mix it up all together in one hit. Something I used to do very regularly at my old house, because all you have to do is then, now I've got seed in that, and there's no double handling, you just chuck it out like that, and we're good to go. Now, before doing all this, it's really handy to know what type of grass you do have. What you can do if you don't know what it is, there's a couple of ways to do it. You can just look up common grass types on the internet and try to match it up. You can also go on, in Australia, there's a website called turffinder.com.au, or maybe just turffinder.com. I'll chuck up on the screen anyway. And it actually has a lot of grass types on there, and you can match it up like that. You can also use Google Lens, pull some of your grass out with roots attached. If you can find some seed head with it as well, get that on there, use Google Lens and try and identify your grass type like that. Works actually pretty well. Or you can use that app I've used before called Picture This, which gets some grass types, not all of them. I know it gets Kikuyu really well, and Cooch as well, which is Bermuda, for you guys again in the States. So it'll get them, just not absolutely everything. But just make sure you do know your grass type before you go trying to repair bare spots, because it's always better to find out what your grass type is and find the right type of seed instead of just going down to Bunnings and getting a seed mix, because most of the time you're going to find it has some annual ryegrass in it, which is going to die out very easily in the summertime. So make sure you find a grass type that is the same as your grass type. That's why if you've got an existing lawn and it creeps, plugs are the way to go, because you know it's going to be the same grass type. If you've seeded a lawn, use the same seed that you used to seed. If you don't know what it is, try and identify your main grass type, and you're going to have to go from there and figure it out. You might need to plug it, or you may need to seed it. Just find something that's going to match, because otherwise you're going to have all this variation in colour and it's going to look a little bit funny. So here are our plugs that we plugged 2 weeks ago. We gave it a hit with some high nitrogen urea last week. We're going to do that again today, but first thing, one thing you got to do when you got plugs is you got to make sure you regularly top dress them, because if you get a little bit of rain, irrigation gets on there, ducks come on here, you will get spots that aren't quite level. So all you got to do, put some sand in there. I'd recommend sand if you are top dressing. That's a bit of bent grass from our old plugs. And just basically do this. Fill them up, because if you've got that nice loose sand in there and it's level, it's just going to help promote it growing in. Easiest way to go about it. So these are just holes. That's what plugs are. They're just areas we've taken good grass, filled it back in with sand or soil. I filled it back in with the old plugs from the area over there, because we had a little bit of root mass and organics in there. So, you know, it does just help that a little bit, because we've been fertilising the area so much. Super simple process, and it works really well. Like, you can see these have moved a bit since we did them the other week, and they will continue to move, and I think they will definitely fill in within the next couple of weeks if I keep up the regular applications of nitrogen. Liquid fertilisers are the go-to, and you do something called spoon feeding, which means you put out sometimes half rate, sometimes quarter rate of your recommended fertiliser dose, and do that on a weekly basis. So you're feeding it more often, so it's taking up the nutrients and stuff and able to push growth more constantly rather than doing it once a month. Now, if you guys want to mimic what I'm spraying out today, I went and bought some urea from Bunnings, put in 100 grams to 4 litres of water in my knapsack. So I had to put it in warm water, mix it up like I did last week. And then I've also put in some of my survival in there, some liquid kelp, to help with our root system as well, because our nitrogen is going to push that top growth and going to sort of stress the roots out a little bit, because it's going to be pushing so much energy into doing that top growth. So we're putting that survival in there as well to help with our roots on top of that. So we're sort of doing two things at once. I am doing other applications on this green with liquid fertilizers with my Lawn Tips mix, which has a lot more P&K and microbes in it. So it's going to get that as well, but we're specifically targeting these areas to help them fill in as quickly as we can. Otherwise, if you don't want to use something like urea, I've got a product called Pronto on my website, which is 24% nitrogen, which you can do that at half rate and still at quarter rate like I'm doing with this, and you get pretty much very similar results. Hopefully you guys learned something from that. That's the ways I'd go about repairing bare spots on any lawn, is those techniques. Remember, the main points are figure out what your grass type is, figure out if it's creeping or if it's bunch chop grass, and then you decide if you're going to seed or if you are going to do plugging. Or you could also just keep up regular mowing and top dressing and watering and a bit of fertilizer, and creeping grass types will fill in by themselves over time without even plugging. It just takes a little bit longer. So you definitely can do that. But they're the main ways I do it. Thank you guys so much for watching, appreciate yours, and I'll see you guys in the next one.